Hello, I'm Stephen Boyce. I'm chair of Winchester Poetry Festival. Since 2008, Hampshire has celebrated poetry and poets through the appointment of a Hampshire Poet Laureate. This idea was the brainchild of Angela Hicken, Literature Development Officer, first for Hampshire County Council and then for Hampshire Cultural Trust. The laureateship has featured both poets who have been established in their careers and those still in the foothills of their careers. But each one has made a distinctive personal contribution to poetry within the county through commissioned works, through readings, through activities of all kinds, including personal initiatives which have left a legacy for others to enjoy. This year, in 2020, Hampshire Cultural Trust and Winchester Poetry Festival have joined together to support and expand the role of the Hampshire Poet, with the intention that really more people can enjoy and be enriched by what Jackie Kay, the Scottish knacker, calls the language of being human. The Hampshire Poet 2020 is Kathryn Bevis. This year is a challenging year in which to be a Poet Laureate. But Kathryn is extremely well equipped to face a challenge. An Oxford graduate in English language and literature, she also has an MPhil in theology, and she has 20 years' experience of teaching. Kathryn has been making a big mark with her poems winning competitions up and down the country of late. First prize in the Poets and Players competition, first prize in the Against the Grain competition, and also she's been shortlisted for the 9 Arches Press Primers scheme. She's currently working towards her first collection. Kathryn teaches poetry writing skills to vulnerable adults in prisons, mental health settings, and also in substance misuse settings. During the COVID crisis, her online courses have proved to be a particular hit. Sarah James, who judged the Against the Grain competition, said of her winning poem, Starlings, "This poem looks beautiful on the page and is powerful, energizing, and musical to read aloud." It's my great pleasure to introduce Kathryn Bevis.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a real honour to be here today to celebrate the 300th anniversary of Gilbert White's birth and to be in this amazing building, the Great Barn on the Gilbert White House estate. I grew up about 7 miles from here in Headley, in the parish of Headley, which adjoined this parish. So this landscape and the creatures in it are really special to me. And I think he writes about this landscape in such a thrilling way. So it's wonderful to be here to celebrate that. I'm going to start by reading you the poem that was commissioned by Winchester Poetry Festival and Hampshire Cultural Trust to celebrate Gilbert and his work. It's called A Vision. The forest is alive today and quick with wild devotion. Bees hum, drunk on puffs of pollen, censer swung from meadow sweet and Queen Anne's lace. Ferns stir themselves to nod and bow. They sail a summer breeze. Open-handed to the sun, each pair of leaves is a single prayer in a reef of fractal patterned green. Damselflies flash and dart, a fever of electric grace. In the shade, a knock-kneed foal gazes, still as any seer. Her flanks are polished silver, her tail an aspergillum. The body of a world at worship cries out to be seen. The beech leaves whisper in a psalm to everything that flickers, foams, and gleams. There's a real joyfulness in Gilbert White's writing, and not only in his prose. We're all familiar with the natural history of Selborne, but also in the poems he wrote, which are rich with sensory detail. So, for instance, he writes of hearing the clamorous curlew call his mate, or the soft quail his tender pain relate. He writes about smells as well, the new-mown hay that scents the swelling breeze, or cottage chimney smoking through the trees. And this next poem is my attempt to capture that kind of richness of sensory detail. It's called Anagrams of Happiness. It's in the damp whirl of biscuit-scented hair on the nape of a newborn, or in the mint of Sunday new potatoes which shine under their lick of butter. It's watching for the phases of the moon, the intentional way it swells and arcs, shrinks and spins. It is your breath's humidity in this bed of ours, a solid ship that rocks us in the dark, or in the winking silk of a spider's web against the misted pane. It's in coffee, sweetened with its glob of honey, drunk outdoors in smoking sips from the thermos lid. It's in our sense that whatever happens now is who we might become. This walk together in the woods, these plump shapes of dripping malachite moss, that fiddlehead of the fern's curled spine. So my wonderful stepfather, Ray Holloway, was born and lived all of his 84 years and died in the parish of Headley, just downstream from here. He owes his name, the Holloway part of it, to this landscape, to its sunken lanes, and its geography was really, really important to him. He loved its hanging woods, its hills, its heathlands. Could often be found in his younger days, metal detectoring and digging up treasure. So this is a poem in his memory. It's called Held. You used to tuck away the things you found. You'd pocket scraps of treasure got on strolls up hangers, down the hollow ways. Some days you'd light upon a blade of sharpened flint, napped by knowing hands, or the small astonishment of a jay's blue-barred feather. Once you dug a silver sixpence from the soil, and best of all, a signet ring in old and glowing gold. Now, the shape of all this missing you cries to be cradled in the curve of my palm like a blown egg. Take it, hold it. Here, I want to say, is something I have gleaned. So for me, the best thing about Gilbert White's writing is the attitude of curiosity and his huge observational capacity that comes across in it. And as a poet, I feel a real affinity with that, not only because I walk around with a notebook in my pocket, but because for me the best poetry, whether it's about the natural world or not, it really relies on that quality of curiosity and alertness, and that's what I love in the poems I read and aspire to in the poems I write. So this next poem, it's about a different sort of landscape, and it's called The Old Man of Store. Our ending happened as a gift. That day, the change blew through us. A shudder flood of starlings flung away like iron filings while we gripped the path, jackets billowing, hair full sail. Even the features of your face, grim set against the wind, threatened to unmoor. We flattened our feet onto the track as thorns thrashed into new shapes against a damaged sky, and the coconut scent of warm gorse faded on the air. At the peak, great lumps of basalt, torn from the hills some other devil day, lay hurled about. The wind spun in the coves of our ears to make them into echo chambers, casting our voices off elsewhere, sending thought to unspoken places. All at once, each flailing thing was stilled. We faced each other, not a word, we knew. As you scrambled separate down the scree, the heather foamed, on fire beneath my feet. So when you read Gilbert White's description of Selborne itself, of the village, he writes about it as one single straggling street. And you could be really forgiven for thinking that the village hasn't changed that much in all this time. And I think careful farming and management of the land by the National Trust around here has really helped to preserve it. But of course, it has changed. The engine, industrialisation, technology have all happened, and rural life is immeasurably different now. So this next poem, it's a commission by St Barb's Gallery in Lymington, locally in the New Forest, and it speaks to that change, I hope. It's in response to an engraving by Robert Tanner called Christmas. The long night's moon throws silver sheets over the chimney pots, the buttercross, the coppice and the stream. A new frost splinters, spreads her fingers, etches each tile, each branch so bright against the dark. Tidy as made beds, the meadows dream of wheat, and trees stretch their roots a little deeper. Children stamp, milky and restless as calves in the barn. Holy, hungry, they sing for Christmas to come. Birds freeze on the bough, and the night throbs with a hard, strange stillness. The world is stirring, coming for us fast. I hear its engine's shuddering path cut up the lane and through the copse, across the drowsy fields. So my other favourite thing about Gilbert White's writing, and the natural history in particular, is his writing about the behaviour of birds, and especially those birds that would have seemed quite ordinary in his day. As I'm thinking of the house martins, the swallows, the swifts. Obviously those birds' populations are now in fast decline. So I wanted to share a poem with you about, ordinary little birds. And again, these birds that I'm going to read about, their population has declined in recent years too. A wedding. That day, the thrushes finally fledged. For weeks, I'd heard his whistled songs to her at dawn. Now, 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 did he do it, did he do it? Then watched her plunge into the hedge, bringing grass, roots and moss to purl with a busy beak. She stamped the floor with mud and spit. She stamped the floor with tiny feet, fed the cup with mud and spit, pressed her speckled belly to the curve until it grew the contours of a bird. As we sent out invitations to the feast, she laid a clutch of brilliant turquoise eggs. Day after day, she sat and hatched her bulge-eyed brood. It was a wide-beaked time that wore her sad and thin. I'd see them both, smashing snails against an anvil, bearing wet meat to their young. Then June came. As I stepped into my dress, Mother fastened silk-covered buttons with her crochet hook, and I watched the last chick totter at the nest's lip. Held my breath while it fluttered, stretched and flew. I brought the lice-infested nest indoors to see a tangle of your hair strung gold against the brown. We have it still, her parting gift. It stinks of food, of flesh, this living mess, this coracle of scraps. And then my last poem today is another birdie one. It's called Starlings. In the beginning is the sky deep, and the sky deep is shapeless and hollow, and blankness dwells there, and the body us broods over the belly of the horizon, clinging to skeletons of trees. And we say, let there be wave trail, and there is wave trail. And we divide the wave trail from the sky deep and the outpour from the inshrink. And we call the wave trail, we are. And we call the sky deep, it is. And we say, let there be curl smoke in the midst of the sky swim. Let it divide the we are from the it is. And we fashion the curl smoke from the sky swim, and it is so. And we call the curl smoke one, and the sky swim we call many. And we say, let the break wave be heard among the many, and the pebble rush also. And we call the break wave flesh, and the pebble rush we call spirit, and thus it is. Then we say, let the spirit be divided into the sky bright we will call light, and the outsnuff we will call darkness, and let darkness bring about a great shitting upon the earth. And we say, let darkness herald the downpour and the stench sweet, the dirt roost and the clutch heart. And so it goes. Glory be to the sky deep and the body us, the curl smoke and the sky swim. Glory be to the break wave and the pebble rush, the dirt roost and the outsnuff. For we are the many, we are the one. I'm delighted to welcome Isabel Rogers to come and read for us now. Isabel's first poetry collection, Don't Ask, was published in 2017, and her work has appeared in various magazines, including Poetry, Poetry Wales, Under the Radar and Muslexia, and it's been widely anthologised as well. In 2014, she won the prestigious Cardiff International Poetry Competition, and she was Hampshire Poet Laureate in 2016. Isabel is currently writing the Stockwell Park Orchestra series of comic novels. They are hilarious. And they're published with Farrago. The third book in the series, Continental Riff, is due out in January 2021.
Thank you very much. Well, follow that. I think any poet would love to have the acute watchfulness of Gilbert White, and that's what we try and bring into whatever we write. And for the first four, I've brought 8 to read tonight, and the first 4, well, at least they're pretending to be about things in nature, but as John Glenday said, and I believe it absolutely, a poem is never about what it's about. So they're pretending to be, the first 4, about bees, spiders, geese, and water. But as you might hear, things tend to go a bit awry. So the first one, Bees, is called The Apiarist. Your heart was like the bees my childhood remembers, visited with the old man who wouldn't let me veil or glove. Let the hive know you, he said, smiling through his cloak of yellow and black. I swallowed our criminal objective. How does one befriend a bee? Every day, fewer of them died, embedded in my flesh. I grew accustomed to the hot pain and swell, they to the small friend of their friend. Soon, I could reach inside the screens to burgle, leaving counterfeit sugar as a truce. I fancied they even welcomed it. In summer, a new queen rose. They swarmed, shimmering over the orchard, an alien steering west, to the low sun and away, leaving my placebo syrup. What I wouldn't give to be stung again. So not really about bees at all. It's all lies. Poems always tell lies. And this one is about a spider, a particular spider. I'm absolutely fascinated by spiders and yet terrified of them. I'm getting better, but I'm not brilliant. And one desk I had a few years ago was faced a window that looked out into the garden, which was fabulous, but it was a brick wall, not a plastered wall, and there were lots of little crinkly bits, and spiders just really like crinkly brick walls. And one day I noticed this huge tube web spider, I think it was, and this came out. So it's called Arachnophobia. I missed her first filament, span a window from sill to ledge. My unfocused gaze, writing's true work, dropped left, and it appeared complete. Parabolas, holding tension as steel cables bridge a ravine. New silk adjusts the spring of its trap. It creeps. June is warm. Flies bloat on pollen air, blunder in, zigzag to the wrong corner. She sprints before they feel the danger. Torpedo from a barrel spun to her exact waist. A paralysing bite, muffling the rising buzz, then silence, and she is gone, flashing emerald chalicery. She feeds, she grows. I work this end of my desk. It's fine. I write until terror overlaps fascination, when silk will reach for me to wrap my struggling pen. Everyone has night sweats, bad dreams. It is our bargain. So that was a tense few months of writing. She disappeared in the end, and I never knew where she went, which was almost equally terrifying. The next two official nature poems I brought, the next is about geese, and I think about this poem at least twice a year in spring and autumn, when you can see the geese go above your head and you suddenly realise that the seasons are changing, and it's such a moment. I love it. It's called The Greylag Migration. I felt a soft distortion in the sky, an unlocatable thrumming, then heard the call for strength, trust, and a true compass. Called and recalled, his bearing sang of ocean flight, of 1,000 wings above the turning planet. The locked vector in each steady head, wearing a groove across the world like iron to the poles. Time's bow wave rippled and shrank to black, leaving me stretching, heavy and unfeathered, solid human, anchored in a new season. It's just that feeling as they've gone and that's it. Time has passed. This fourth one is about water, but it's not just about, oh, look, there's a stream and it's all very pretty in the Gilbert White fashion. Being me, I've written it in the voice of a water molecule. It's called H2O. I would be a bad scientist, forever diving like a spaniel into question-choked verges. The 3-atom triptych slakes a manifold thirst. I would be a bad molecule. I love too fiercely, hold grudges. I would drift in vapour until we gathered, feeling the thrill as we mass, drawn by forces we can't name. Articulation, not a burden we are obliged to carry. Then, after the shocking intimacy of simultaneous condensing, we would fall, not mourning our wings, but diving gleefully to the solid end stop below. We are no match for it. We are liquid and cannot be relied upon. If, in that explosion, we catch half stories of seas ruling land, xylem hidden in hardwood, the surge under a storm, stiff ice nosing towards salt, we know our chemistry is fungible. Any one of us could kill you. We forget which, so feel no guilt. All this as we rip apart. We wonder if we should mark the loss of friends, label it love or ennui or relief. But the question slips and we feel an old tug. Involuntary lightning and we fly again. Science measures rainfall. I would be a bad scientist, leaning into mutability like a worm on a shroud. So that's it for my official nature poems tonight. I've got 4 more. The next 2 are really about our place in nature and therefore in the world. I find myself trying to match up the physical signals we get from the world with what we think about it, and the dichotomy between those 2 things is often quite confusing. And I don't know if you've ever been drifting off to sleep in the sunshine and something suddenly snaps and you get this geometric under your eyelids and you don't know quite where you are. This next poem came out of an experience a bit like that. It's called Liminal, which I know is a forbidden word in poetry, but I made a whole poem about it. On that fulcrum before sleep, I lay half in sun, legs denim baked, head shaded by an oak in full leaf, when a pulse of noise snapped geometrics under my eyelid. I wonder if, in that beat, I flicked out of the world, as we once feared photographers trapped us on a glass plate with their magnesium strobe. Did I leave my body bisected there and rise like smoke, snapped out of being, to marvel at such an arbitrary exit, to wonder who now moved through my warm bones, who asked these questions, demanding answers, as if writing an open door can conjure it from thought alone, and knot these two worlds together, before the great drift erases knowledge of how to return, and I slip away, unmoored and unremembered. And the next one is about how we can absolutely be at the mercy of our physical sensations, whether we like it or not sometimes. It's called A Second Burning. I imagined myself immune, but it was only decoyed by daylight trepanning my skull. The tug of the idea of you aligns my blood, dilates me. To move is to be undone, but I locked that memory in soundproof glass and didn't flinch as I walked. We had a savage beauty, you and I. It was salt and copper, ink, blood and bone. Tomorrow's bulk wearies me with its edifice of responsibility. Come, take my hand, my mouth, my pliant weight. Feel the flame roar. Open the furnace and let the blast winnow our regret over the future. And finally, we have two poems which talk about how the nature of women has always been analysed and defined, usually by men, and how we're trying to break out of that damaging divide which benefits nobody, frankly. I don't think anybody's nature can be put in a box. So it's just about that, really. The first one is called The Voyage. She is set fair. No more will storms buffet and tug. Her anchor weighed. She swallowed link on lump and link and bit down hard, watched it sink alone with grim delight. Her sails fill, safe through rocks toward the sunset and the deep wide sea of fable and her memory. No more tickling crew, forever rearranging her rigging, debarnacled in port. Now sleek under the waterline, she flexes her rudder, oiled supple, and executes a perfect figure of eight. Dolphins sew her bow seam straight. Any moment, she will shake loose the crow's nest, lean her mast into full weather, conjure new sap from brine and algae, encourage leaves. And finally, I have a not entirely serious poem about how we try and fix the nature of male writing and female writing. And if you've ever read a review, there's a little bit of vocabulary reserved for men, and then they use a different one for women, and it's very odd because it's got nothing to do with the words on the page. So I wrote this called The Male Poetess. If this poem speaks of love, is there double bluff tenderness behind a sheen of testosterone? Or metrosexuality, gyms and quiet intraline lacunae? Or is it rougher hewn, possibly northern? Dredge your prejudice. Animals must be cross-referenced. Decode beards on the Whitman Index. Can a man talk of breasts without weighing them between motherhood and lust? If children loom, do they cloy with domestic oppression, or are they beacons to offset muscular restraint? Be honest, one brain to another. Reject partisan words, maimed for the cause, burdened by female weakness. Read your Saussure, your ranking. No word shall be mute to half of humanity. Let Hughes be feisty, Plath brutal. Let Dickinson be unsurpassed and Donne emotional. Let Craig Raine be silent. Honour the dictionary or weaponise vocabulary and find your lips sewn shut with pretty pink thread. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to welcome Stephen Boyce to read for us here this evening. Stephen is co-founder of the Winchester Poetry Festival and he's also its current chair. The poet Michael Longley said of the Winchester Poetry Festival, this is not just a good festival, this is a great festival, and this city, that's Winchester, should be very proud to have it, and proud we are. Stephen is the author of 3 well-received poetry collections: Desire Lines, published by Arrowhead in 2010, The Sisyphus Dog, published by Warple in 2014, and most recently The Blue Tree, published by Indigo Dreams in 2019. And he's also published 3 pamphlet collections. A resident of Winchester for over 30 years, Stephen now lives in North Dorset.
Thank you very much, Kathryn. When Kathryn invited me to be part of this reading, it was a particular thrill for me personally, because Gilbert White has been a hero of mine since I was a boy of 12. That was when I was given the Natural History of Selborne, my grandfather's 1894 edition, beautifully embossed, which he had received, I think, on his 12th birthday. So that was rather special. But it wasn't until later in life that I realised that Gilbert White and I share a birthday, albeit 230 years apart. So it's a great privilege to be part of this reading and to enjoy poems about and inspired by nature. I'm going to start by reading 2 poems about trees. They both arose from visits that I made to an ancient woodland near my own home called Duncliffe Wood. But they also refer to some extent to my childhood growing up in Surrey and visiting places like Selborne and its hangars, its beach hangars, which have a particular resonance for me. Triangulation. Duncliffe rises from the vale, the woodland lying across its contours like a pie crust. Mapless, I take my bearings from a stand of oak, a windbreak of yellow poplar, 2 Scots pine, trees as waymarkers, trees also as trig points of the heart, like this immense beach, whose wide arc gives line of sight to Leith Hill, soft landings among husks and leaves. A maple counts off the seasons on a colour wheel of young love. Love green, love golden, love bleeding. While all along the field's edge, hips and haws mark exact coordinates of rapture and use soft red berries measure 1 too many winter deaths. This next poem partly addresses that sense that woodland can be both in uplifting, comforting, but also somewhat unsettling. There's always the unease beneath the surface of woodland, however familiar it may be to us. Refuge. What washes up in the forest is no less a wonder than the flotsam of oceans. Take this skeleton of an upturned ark, stranded among a reach of ash trees, beached in leaf litter, its ribs and spars secured by a rigging of twiggy larch, tangles of plaited honeysuckle, all leaning in, as if wanting to give ear to silence. Breathe the wood's cool must. Some Crusoe surely built this, laid limbs against a fallen ridgepole, wove vines and brushwood, spread out a bed of brash, learned how stillness is a state of mind, here where things slither, drip and flinch. Moving away from woodlands for a moment, but you'll find that trees have a tendency to spread their tendrils and push up their roots in all sorts of odd places in my poems. I want to move to South Wales for a moment, to Larne, the town which Dylan Thomas wrote about and lived in for much of his life. This is really something to do with the way in which nature, weather, light, season, all conspire to create places of ever-changing beauty, and that is very much the case with Larne, out on a wide estuary, constantly changing and constantly developing, as it were, new meaning for us. Larne. Everything is about to turn. Between the stillness and the flow, two trees look like one. Two stones are simply two. The robin on a jewelled branch at the window, head to one side, listens just like you. He too measures his day by the tide, easing in and out, quick, slow, quick, slow. Silence exhales softly, rolls out like a long blank page where oystercatcher and curlew make their sudden marks. The horizon settles snug in the estuary's broad embrace. It is all you need for comfort, that and the silversmith's cat, unmoved. The stones cease to glisten as the sun wilts. Its dying light picks out the trees one by one by one. A heartbeat has come and gone. So we heard about curlews and other birds, and I want to read a couple of poems about birds. This poem, Nest, is really just, it speaks for itself, I guess, but inspired by finding on the ground, as one does, the perfect nest. See this light as a feather coracle of love, constructed from jetsam and shavings, fibres and twigs, each stem of grass, every strand of moss, snagged wool, shaken out tuft of hair, woven with care to the curve of cupped palms, hands shaped to a gesture of giving, birthplace, nursery, schoolroom, home. Listen, this bowl is singing. A very different bird, but a bird which for me is my favourite of the corvid family, the chough. Birds are kind of spiritual creatures, aren't they? Or perhaps I should say spirit creatures sometimes, messengers. It's part of that sort of richness of enjoying nature, particularly as a writer, that it has so much metaphorical depth and scope for us as writers. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're so drawn to it. So the chough is one of the great corvid family, a crow. And actually this poem was inspired by a visit to the Gower Peninsula, so not far from Larne, where we were a few moments ago. Chuffs. At the cliff's edge we crouched among tussocks, peaty humps plump as church kneelers. The birds came and went, above, below, above again, scurred in and out of a sea-facing scarp, rose on the updrafts, their red legs dangling, steadied, then turned in the salty blast, before floating away like wadges of paper, gossipy letters set loose by fire, carrying their secrets in smouldering char, to wedge in a cleft of the rock or drift on the wind, too far out and long gone. Just in case you thought this was all about trees and birds, I want to throw in some wildflowers, a few butterflies. This is a poem which draws on those sources. One of the good things, of course, about butterflies is true too of wildflowers and other aspects of nature. The names that they carry are so evocative. And again, I think it's one of the things that attracts poets to them. This poem is called Soundless. I brought home wild marjoram, scabious, and a pink parsley to catch your eye in the little kitchen, leaving my hurt pride by the roadside. After all our talk, I'd wanted to bring butterflies to stir the air in the bedroom, flitting blues, graylings, gatekeepers with watchful eyes, and a Jersey tiger moth, its scarlet flash so startling. But my hands were too slow in the heat of the afternoon, and besides, in time, one of us would break the silence, though the butterflies, soundless and unexpected, go on slipping through our fingers forever. This next poem actually takes us to Australia and the rainforest. The landscape and the wildlife may be more exotic there, but I think the effect of nature, its impact on our senses and on our emotions, is every bit as meaningful and as powerful wherever you draw your source. Emerging from rainforest. Hear the 9-note calling bird, all-night sentinel among fig, myrtle, and eucalyptus. The moth, impatient tapper at windows. Forest dragon and orange-toed scratchy thing. A lumpen frog, gawping at the lit footpath. Who cares? What matters is the night, moonlight on the coast, the ocean shelf where you and I have perched in this moment of unadulterated peace. For we have passed the stage of being mere creatures, of habit or otherwise, and of ourselves. We are sentient, placid. We have grown content in our presentiment of the not far off, to which almost everything seems to alert us, with echoes of that insistent 9-note summons. I'm going to read two poems to finish, two new poems, which I've been writing as part of a collaboration with a friend who's a photographer and who has made a wonderful record, a photographic essay in black and white, of a beach avenue near his home in Peebles. And this has inspired a number of poems. I very rarely write poems that are directly topical, and perhaps this is, in a way, an example. But I've certainly avoided writing anything about the virus and the pandemic that we're living through, except sometimes you just can't suppress what's going on. So this poem is called Beech Trees in a Time of Virus. Ahead is always the tunnel. To the side are spars like pit props, hewn, hard won, stumped. Count and count again the trunks, measure the distances between, the space, the loss of shade or shelter, of green. See through the tangled branches, make something of this sky, that patch of grey, the birds when they appear. Keep your eye on the path, its turning point, the field gate, any lone stranger, another human heart. Hear that breath in the leaves, the easy exhalation, the latent death. Be still. Give thanks. See the tunnel heave. And finally, this poem, which was the first poem that I wrote in response to these wonderful images, which I hope will see the light of day before too long. This poem is called A Prospect of Beech Trees, and I hope it's an appropriate one to finish on, because beech trees are so much part of this landscape around Selborne, and particularly the beech hangers that we know here behind the Gilbert White house. So I think they bring us back to our source and inspiration in Gilbert White. A Prospect of Beech Trees. Sometimes a tree becomes a stoop, a font at the threshold of winter, its gnarled joints offering the blessing of damp beech mast, leaf and twig and husk. And lingering there, the sweet musk of decades of mulch trampled by the feet of drovers, huggers, lovers, and some who found respite in shade took shelter from a squall. Sometimes a tree stretches its limbs skywards with the taut musculature of a dancer celebrating light, the architecture of exuberance. Even leafless, it's in motion, leaning into the wind, drawing shapes in the air, elegant tableau lit by fits of pale sun, the sap slowing in its veins. Sometimes a tree, swollen by pollarding, embraces the metal barbs that mark its bounds, quietly enfolds the possibility of pain within the tightness of its bark. Bludgeoned by axe, lightning struck, taxed with too much weight, the tree endures, defies from season to season what we think we know of stamina, of strength, of tolerance. Sometimes in rough weather, a tree issues a silent prayer from its fissures and splits, where the scar of a lost branch makes a lip out of absence, and absence evokes its own meditation on beauty, each healed welt, each blemish a mark of something lost, a badge of something turned to gain. And sometimes a choir of trees teaches us how to hope, what it is to dream. Their roots in concert extending into the next field, ageless beneath the mould and turf. Each pulse, every quiver of hidden fibre connects with the next copse or spinney, listens, receives, sends back life's vibrant call. Thank you.
Well, it's been glorious to celebrate the life and work of Gilbert White with you all in this way tonight. I want to thank Gilbert White and the Oates Collection here in Selborne for hosting us in this beautiful space, and also to thank Winchester Poetry Festival and Hampshire Cultural Trust, who fund and appoint the role of Hampshire Poet, and in doing so, they make all sorts of work, including events like this, possible for us. Heartfelt thanks to Isabel Rogers and to Stephen Boyce for making this event so special with your spellbinding readings. It was really a privilege to hear your poems this evening in this setting. Thank you very much to our filmmaker, Matt Grover, for being so patient with us all. And last but not least, thank you to all of you who've joined us in this way by watching us. I hope you've enjoyed it.